Hi, I'm Mike Peters. My guest today is the most widely published cartoonist in the world. His Beetle Bailey is seen in over 1,700 newspapers in Europe, Asia, and Africa. He's the winner of cartooning's Reuben Award. He's written numerous books and is truly dedicated to the history and preservation of cartooning. I'm talking about the one, the only Mort Walker. Mort, it is so wonderful that you're here. I've got a confession. I've been carrying your book backstage at the strips around with me for 4 days. I've got bags under my eyes. I've stayed up sleepless at night. It's a fabulous book. It's a book.
You were able to lay it down one night?
Oh, well, right before tonight I had to. But it's a fabulous book. It talks about strips. It's great for kids. I wish that I had it when I was a kid.
Well, I've read a lot of books about cartooning when I grew up myself, and I thought there was always something lacking. There was always sort of a catalog or a history, and it was pretty dry. You know, cartooning is fun. The cartoons are meant to be fun, and nobody ever wrote a book to show the fun that there was in our profession. So I decided that was something I should dedicate myself to, is to the funny guys that draw comics and the funny things that happen when you're in this crazy profession. Mm-hmm. And I had a lot of fun researching it and writing it.
Now, you were a dynamite kid yourself. At the age of 14, you had already published 300 cartoons.
Right. Mm-hmm. At
the age of 18, you were the head of the art staff at Hallmark Cards. Is that right?
I was in the editorial department working with the writers.
Jeez.
And I used to illustrate their ideas. So that when they finally got over to the art department, the art department would get the concept that the writers had. Mm-hmm. Otherwise, the writers would write some beautiful prose and verse, and it would get over there, and the art department would draw something entirely different than they conceived. So it was an experiment, and I drew all the cards that went out of Hallmark, except for the roses and everything like that. But I drew all the Disney cards and the Dagwood and Blondie cards for about 2 years.
Oh my gosh. And then at the same time, you were sending out gag cartoons to magazines.
Right. I was selling to Flying Aces magazine, Inside Detective, and all the great magazines. And also, I had a comic strip going in the Kansas City Journal when I was 15.
Mm-hmm. And what was that called?
It was called The Lime Juicers, and it was about British sailors. And I'd read that they were called lime juicers because they carried limes along with them to prevent scurvy. And I don't know why this appealed to me, but being landlocked in Kansas City, I thought anything about the sea was just marvelous. And it was a great deal like Beetle Bailey. I was just shocked one day when I went back and looked at those old strips, and I said, I'm doing an upgraded Beetle Bailey.
Isn't that fabulous?
A fat captain, now I got a fat sergeant.
Well, when you first started doing the Beetle character, he wasn't Beetle. He was a character in some panel cartoons that you were doing.
Right. Mm-hmm.
For who?
The Saturday Evening Post, which was the largest magazine at that time, and they bought the most cartoons of any other publication in the business. And so when I came to New York, I walked into the editor's office, and he had seen my work when I was editor of the humor magazine at the University of Missouri. And here I was drawing domestic cartoons and things I didn't know anything about because I was a young bachelor. He said, why not draw what you know about? He said, draw those college cartoons that you used to do. And then one day he spotted a character. He said, the guy with a pork pie hat over his eyes. He said, feature him and maybe we'll buy it as a feature. And so I began doing a whole lot of this character named Spider.
Could you draw him for us?
Sure. Mm-hmm. And Spider was named after a fraternity brother of mine in the University of Missouri who was a big, lanky kid basketball player. And he got drunk one night and started climbing up the hill to our fraternity house on his hands and knees, and somebody looked out and said, he looks just like a spider. So that name stuck. And all the characters in my fraternity house had some kind of a name. There was Diamond Jim, who was the rich man's son. There was Plato, who was the smart guy. Bitter Dick, who always had an acerbic comment on everything. Bear Tracks, who was a great big goofy-looking guy. Sweat Sock, who was the fraternity jock, and things like that. So I put them all together into a strip one time, after the Saturday Evening Post didn't buy it as a feature. And I made a comic strip out of it, and I took it to King Feature Syndicate, and they took it right away. And it was an immediate failure. But those things do happen. There wasn't until the Korean War heated up and I had to take him out of college and put him into the Army that the strip began to sell.
No kidding. Now it wasn't called Spider, though.
No, I had to change the name because they had another comic strip with a character named Spider.
Huh.
So they said come up with another name, and I came up, boy,
you know, another
Beetle.
bug. Yeah, and it's before the mop tops from you know, the Beatles.
Oh yeah, the Beatles. Yeah, they don't know how to spell.
Well, do you ever see that guy Spider who you took the cartoon from?
No, they made me change the name because they had
Why?
another character in another strip. Big Ben Bolt had a character named Spider in it. I hadn't realized that, so they said, get us a better bug. So I just thought of Beetle. And the Bailey came from the editor of the Saturday Evening Post who had bought all my work and sort of put me on the map, and his name was John Bailey, so I just thought, I'll honor him by putting him in a comic strip.
Oh, that's terrific.
And so that's where Beetle Bailey came from.
Now, you've only done one Beetle Bailey showing his eyes.
Mm-hmm.
Is there any way, and that wasn't even printed, right?
It was only printed in my book.
No kidding.
We decided that would be his trademark, that he would never take his hat off. But if anybody wants to see his eyes,
Yes, yes.
There they are. No, don't let it get any farther than this.
That's not fair. That's not fair. I thought we were going to have a first here. You're going to show something. Well, okay. Now tell me
It's too
about.
horrible to see, though.
Oh, all right, all right. Now tell me about some of the other characters. About Sergeant Snorkel. Now, a lot of these characters were taken from people.
Yes, Sergeant Snorkel was patterned after a sergeant that I had when I was at Washington University during the war. And his name was Sergeant Savu, and he was a big, portly man and tough as nails, you know. And everybody was scared to death of him, except that we'd come in at Christmas time or Valentine's Day, and we'd find out that he had written a little poem to his boys and put one on each pillow, which showed that I thought it was kind of incongruous. Here's this tough guy with a heart of gold, you know, that there's some softness in it, and the combination of those characteristics I thought would make an interesting personality. So I drew, you know, I patterned Sergeant Snorkel after him.
Could you draw Sergeant Snorkel?
Sergeant Snorkel, sure.
Oh, great.
One of the things that's interesting every now and then when you're talking with young kids is to get them to identify characters just by one line. Like that I'd say, who's that, you know? And so I'm always hoping they'll come up immediately and say, Sergeant Snorkel. One kid said, Bullwinkle. So I stopped doing that. In the beginning, I couldn't figure out where to put Sergeant Snorkel's tooth. Mm-hmm. At one time, he had 2 or 3 fangs, and one was on the bottom, one was on the top. Little by little, he developed so he only has 1 fang. And when we went to do an animated show, they couldn't figure out what to do with his tooth when he turned, so his tooth travels all over his mouth. Well, there's Sergeant Snorkel. 300 pounds of pure fun.
Oh, gosh. How long had you been doing Beetle before you decided to start doing a family strip?
It was about 2 years. Somebody came from another syndicate, and they thought I was a good gag writer, and they wanted me to write a family strip for them. So I called my syndicate and said, could I do that? And they said, no, but if you want another family strip, write one for us.
No kidding.
So I created Hi and Lois. Hi and Lois was a spin-off of my fear that Beetle was going to, the war in Korea, when it ended, that people weren't going to want to read an army strip anymore. Mm-hmm. So I thought, well, what'll I do? I'll take Beetle home and get him involved in domestic affairs with his sister and brother-in-law and their kids. And so I took him home for a while, and everybody began yelling. All my readers said, hey, we like him in the Army, put him back. So I put him back, and the characters that he was involved with, his sister Lois and brother-in-law Hi. See?
Oh, no.
So, and that you'll find that on a trivia quiz every now and then.
Is that fabulous?
Yeah. If you ever play trivia, that's one of their
so
questions.
Lois, in Hi and Lois, is Beetle's...
Beetle's sister.
Isn't that fabulous?
So then,
you heard it here first. This is great.
Second.
Second.
So anyway, they said, do us a family strip. So I did some gags, and they liked them and everything. So we looked around for the best cartoonists we could find. Sylvan Bike, our comics editor, said he would make a list, and I went home, I made a list. And we didn't care whether they were drawing a strip or not, or what they were doing. We just wanted to get the best doggone cartoonists in the business. And we met a couple of weeks later, and I had a list of about 15 people, and so did he. At the top of both of our lists was Dick Brown, who at that time was doing advertising drawing for an agency in New York. So Sylvan called him up and got him on the phone and said, would you like to do a strip for us? And Dick says, yeah, okay, sure, you know. Then he hangs up and he looks around the office to see who's missing, because there's so many practical jokers, you know. He said, nobody ever calls you up and say you want to do a comic strip. So he looked around, he said, everybody was at work, and he said, well, couldn't be one of them. So he called King Features back, and he said to Sylvan, he said, did you just call me? And someone said, yeah. He said, wow! So I'd never met him. He came over to the office, and God, he's turned out to be one of, my best friend, and he's a partner for 30 years.
Jeez.
And
then, of course, we know him. I mean, we know him from both Hi and Lois, and then Hager the Horrible.
Hager the Horrible.
Now, in strips, I know as in editorial cartoons, we have censorships. We have certain things that we just cannot do because of our editors. Are there any taboos in comic strips?
Well, there used to be a lot more than there are now. Back in the old days, they killed one of my strips one time because I showed a skunk.
A skunk?
Yeah, they thought skunks are obnoxious. People don't like them. You couldn't say martini in there. You could say, they had all kinds of names for alcohol, like Suds and Kickapoo Joy Juice and things like that. And of course, all the bottles were marked XXX. And you couldn't mention divorce. Nobody ever died in the comics. There was all kinds of things that you couldn't do. One of the things I ran into is that when I draw a girl, want me to draw a girl?
Yes, yes.
Okay. I'd draw a pretty girl in a bikini, and I would naturally endow her with what God gave her, what everybody has. And I'll show you in just a minute. First, I got to get the girl. Took God 7 days to make a girl. I can do it in about 3 seconds. I'd go draw a girl in a bikini, and then I'd give her a navel.
Yeah.
And you couldn't do that in those days. There was even a television show called I Dream of Jeannie, where they had to cement her navel in because you couldn't show a girl's navel.
No, I didn't know that.
Down at King Features, they had an editor that used to take a razor blade and whack off my navels and all my girls. And I began to discover that, so I would, I'd give him a couple of extra around, you give him something to do, because editors never work, it's the cartoonists that work. And they began collecting them, and I went down there one time, and there was this little box, and it was called Beetle Bailey's Belly Button Box, and it was filled with these little dots. So I thought, oh boy, so I began giving them navels and the borders and all over the doggone place like snow. And one day I had Cookie in the strip receive a tremendous shipment of navel oranges, and I just had navels all over the place. They gave up finally, and now I can do that offensive thing.
Oh gosh. Well, are there any new taboos? Are there things that we can't do today?
I think Gary Trudeau in Doonesbury has paved the way that we can do just about everything today. You couldn't use a swear word, hell even, Remember the trouble that Clark Gable got in for saying, frankly, Scarlett, I don't give a damn. People were absolutely shocked out of their gourds when he said that. And of course, now you go to the movies and see what you hear, or hear what you see. And so a lot of taboos have been broken down, and it's a lot more realistic, although comics are still the cleanest form of literature that there is. Even children's books, grim fairy tales where they have all kinds of child burning, out in the woods, they go out and abandon their children, and then the witch gets them and puts them in the furnace and everything like that. The children's books are full of all kinds of gore and terrible things. Comics are still the safest and sanest and purest form of literature that there is.
Now, I know that we editorial cartoonists, we always get bad letters, and I just know from knowing you that you've gotten bad letters sometimes over like Miss Buxley and the lecherous old half-track,
Yeah. Well, there's what has happened, they say, is that there's a heightened awareness as to women's problems, and I've come to appreciate it over the years, because I was doing the standard type of thing that everybody does. You know, you look at a pretty girl and you whistle at her, and she's fair game. And I found out, you know, through some of my letters, that women don't like that, especially when a boss does it to his secretary, you know, because she's captive. Her job depends on, you know, putting up with anything that he does. So I really had to tone down on that standard dumb blonde secretary routine that I had, which everybody had done over the years.
Okay, here you are, the reigning king of strips. You're seen more by any other cartoonist. You do more strips than anybody else. Can you tell kind of what makes a good strip?
If I knew exactly, I'd do it. I'd be more successful with some of my other ones. I would say, just offhand, that you have a great identifiable character, first of all. People have to know immediately who he is and what he looks like. And somebody always said, you've got to be able to draw him in silhouette and still have him recognizable. You know, I can, for instance, show you a little bit, like everybody knows who that is, Little Orphan Annie.
Sure.
And everybody knows whose hair that is, Dagwood. And Dick Tracy's nose, you know. There, one or two lines can identify a character. But then the personality is also important. They should have a warm personality. Usually they should be an underdog. They should be somebody that doesn't put the reader down. The reader identifies with him because the guy has as much trouble or more trouble than he does. It's usually a loser in a way. Beetle's a loser, you know. What's funny about being successful? If you drew a handsome, successful man in a funny comic strip, he wouldn't be funny. You'd have to surround him with funny characters. Oftentimes, that's what I've done with Beetle. Beetle is a pretty normal, average G.I. Joe. You know, he's not really repulsive looking. Then I surround him with repulsive, like Sergeant Snorkel and Cookie and people like that. Then, of course, the gag's got to be funny.
Sure.
And that's the hardest thing to come up with. But that's the greatest joy, is to sit there or lie there, as I do. I usually lie down when I'm thinking of ideas, because all the blood comes to my head and makes it warmer and it flourishes better. At least that's the excuse I use when people walk in and see me lying down.
Now, do you do that during the day?
Yeah.
When, in the morning or any special
Usually
time?
I start in the morning, about 8:30, 8 o'clock.
I mean, as far as getting ideas. And do you do that at home, or do you do?
I do it at home.
No, in bed?
No, I have a lounge chair that.
Isn't that exciting? I'm writing all this down, Mort.
I try to write as many ideas as I can, and the way I've found the best way to write an idea is just to start writing. You don't get an idea first. You just say, Beetle and Sarge are walking down the street, and Sarge says, Beetle, pick up that butt, and Sarge says, I picked it up yesterday, or something like that. You know, and you get yourself in a corner where you have to come up with a punchline. And then I'll sit there and think, what's he going to say? And I find that keeps me busy. I can write 30 or 40 ideas a day.
Oh my gosh.
You're surprised what you come up with if you force yourself to do it. But if you sit there with that blank piece of paper, where we call blank paper fever, and you look at it and you say, oh, I'm not going to get any ideas. There's no more ideas up here. 35 years I've been doing this. There's probably not one idea left there, you know. And, you know, then you drive yourself crazy.
Sure.
Go out of business.
Yeah. Now, certain cartoonists say that they have idea days and drawing days. Is that true?
I do. I try to write all my ideas, because it takes you a while to get warmed up to it. Early in the morning, my mind is filled with other things. You're thinking about all the things you got to do tomorrow, or things you should be doing today, or whatever. And you got to clear your mind in order to write and get yourself concentrating on that stuff. And sometimes that takes half an hour or so. But then once you get going, I hate to hear the phone ring or have anybody interrupt me, because then you got to get back on track again. Sometimes you never do.
Now you're one of the only cartoonists I've ever known who has taken tricks of the trade in comic strips and have put them down on paper. Tell me about how about why you did that, first of all.
I did it in the beginning as a joke. It was a kind of a spoof on all the tricks that cartoonists use, the symbols and so forth. And I wrote a little article for the National Cartoonist Society magazine, and people thought it was funny. And then I began hearing people use these terms that I made up. They were pseudo-scientific terms. And people started using them, and my son said, Dad, he says, you better get your name on this. He said, why don't you write a book and get it all cataloged, and then your name will be on it, and you'll get credit for it. You'll go into the English language. He says, you're going in there anyway, you know. So I did. I went over to the Museum of Cartoon Art and did research. I went through all the old comic strips I could find and found all the symbols and devices that cartoonists use that are internationally known throughout the world. If you travel in Japan and you draw one of these things, they'll know exactly what you're doing. And then I put them together in a book called The Lexicon of Kamakana, which is a
oh, that's very
puffed-up
impressive.
word, yeah.
Very impressive. Show the difference between, and forgive me, I may be not saying the words right, but a waftaram.
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 Is
Waftaram.
what comes from, let's say, when you're cooking a pie, and you just put it out on the counter after it's cooked, and a waftaram is. Waftarams can, you know, boy, they go right under somebody's nostril somewhere, you know.
Okay, now what's the difference between that and an endotherm?
An endotherm is like what comes out of a cup of coffee that's hot. You know, you've got to show that the coffee is hot. So an endotherm is just a little squirrel.
This is so fun for me. I swear, I sat up howling at this, but I was, all right, okay.
You didn't get as much fun as I did doing it.
Oh, no, it's wonderful. Okay, now show the thing about the, is it soul raid? Now that's the sun rays that come down.
Soul rods, you know.
Soul rod,
yeah.
soul rod.
They're just to show that the sun is shining and so on.
Okay, now what's the lapse beams showing the hot sun with the wiggle lines? See, I mean, like one looks like it's at the beginning of the day, and the other sun looks like it's, you know, right in the middle of the day and it's real hot.
Well, cartoonists used to do that to show passage of time.
Okay.
You know, you draw this in the beginning. That shows it was early morning, see? And then midday, the cartoonists would draw this, so you'd know that it was midday because the sun is up and everything like
See,
that.
these cartoonists have been doing this for 1,000,000 years, and nobody's ever put
that in the second panel, and you know that there's a passage of time.
Oh, okay. Okay, now show the fast heights.
There's somebody running. You got to show somebody running first.
Yeah.
And we can combine fast heights.
Okay.
These are speed lines, really.
Right, speed lines, okay.
And then also, in combination with the fast heights, you can have Briffets, which...
Briffets. Isn't that a great name? What a great name for a cloud, you know, Briffet.
And, you know, even if they're running on a marble floor that has no dust on it, you still have to have a Briffet. And then you suspend him in air to make him look like he's running faster by putting a shadow under it.
Yes, okay, all right. Okay, now show the, is it called an agitron, where the guy is really surprised, you know?
Yeah, everybody uses these all the time.
Okay.
See, agitron is just to show the shake of the head, like he's going, huh?
Agitron.
The double take.
Now, tell me, you know, show me that one thing when people get, are either sleeping or have an idea.
Okay,
what
well,
happens?
everybody knows the sleeping thing. You know, here's a guy that's asleep, you know. And let's say he's really asleep and he's snoring. I think everybody knows this symbol of the sawing wood, the log that's being sawed. And then, of course, the Z's that come out to accompany it, you know, accentuate the thing. That's a log, in case you didn't know. Now, if it were you drawing this, you'd go, log, I know you. And that's sleeping, and everybody knows that one.
Yes.
Then, if you're getting an idea, usually there's a cumulus balloon, cumulus taken from the cloud. Here's a guy that's getting an idea. And he's very happy about it. And show.
Well, at least we know how old that is, because it can't be any older than Edison. So as we know, it must have started about then.
Well, I don't always like to disagree with you, but I did some research on that, and we actually found lamps being used that way. The symbol of light and idea goes way, way back in history.
No
and you'll find all kinds of references to that. Even caveman drawings had type of things like that.
Now, about 10 years ago or so, I think, you started the Cartoon Museum of Art.
Mm-hmm.
Now, where is that?
It's outside of Port Chester, New York. It's in Rybrook.
Mm-hmm.
And we found an old castle, which we thought would symbolize the importance of cartooning. But it's a funny little castle, so I think it's very appropriate for us to be in that place.
And I'd love to see that. Is everyone represented in there?
Everybody we can get to send us drawings.
Oh,
we have 60,000 cartoons in our collection.
60,000?
Mm-hmm.
Well, that's fabulous.
We started from nothing.
Oh. Well, this has been such a joy having you here.
It's been great.
And it's been a wonderful joy having you joining us. Please join us again on this World of Cartooning. I'm Mike Peters.